wealth is created through property, and the only reason that is due to leverage.
And money seems to have this property where it just attracts money, right? So it just ends up in the one place, and then you have everyone just going through on autopilot. Most people are unconscious. They're just spending money. I've got money in the bank, I'll spend it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Lat Chat. Today, we don't have your typical finance bro, financial guy on the podcast. We've got a guy who came up with the first business of selling JDM parts or building JDM parts in high school and selling those out, ran a mechanical shop, and is now helping people buy property and build real wealth through great financial guidance without the sales pitch. The founder of Arkadiusz and self-proclaimed the money friend. I'm sure you've seen him on social media, but if you haven't, he's here with us today. Arkadiusz, how are you, mate?
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for
Absolute
coming on,
pleasure.
bro.
I hate accountants.
All right, right on there.
right,
And
let's
that'll
go.
do. Thanks for another episode of No.
This is great.
All right, great. Now,
Discuss.
we're going to start this a little bit differently. We were just talking about something off pod, and I needed to bring it up. Why don't you or go for what you literally just told us 4 seconds before starting the podcast?
Yeah, it's if you don't mind, I'll take
Go
my
for it.
phone out
Go for
because
it.
I don't want to. I don't know if you do this, but I take a lot of notes.
Absolutely.
We lost over $267,000 worth of revenue this week because we told our clients their kid, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, or wife were ugly. Now, obviously that wasn't the case, but we told them that they shouldn't buy a property. So we're actually terrible salespeople, and it's one of the biggest reasons our clients are successful. And if that statement confuses you, listen to it again or watch this video to understand how telling our clients the truth results them to building financial strength, literacy, and security. So it's a bit of a fear for us because obviously that's lost revenue and those clients have gone elsewhere because we've told them not to do something. We've told them not what they want to hear. So don't buy the studio apartment in Bondi Junction. Don't buy that house that's falling apart where our building and pest inspector said that there's $350,000 worth of remedial work. Whereas another broker who's getting paid a commission, why would they say no?
100%.
So, yeah.
I love the ethics on that. So you're coming from an ethical angle. I've spoke to you about this before. You're doing things in the best interest of the client. Sometimes means you're losing out on money, lifetime value, current value. You're in an industry that's saturated with people who are doing the opposite. How do you try to convey that value and show people like the difference?
I think we don't. And this is probably my biggest weakness is I'm not a marketing person. I'm definitely creative. I definitely have a creative flair. But essentially we just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So either people see that or they don't. And, we're not selling on a conversation. We're essentially just opening a relationship and helping someone understand their options. So when someone's showing us a property, for example, our job's to say, and I spoke to Kirill, one of my business partners this morning about this, is like, on that phone call, we should say, do you want us to just help you buy this? Or would you like to understand whether or not it fits the criteria to be a solid investment asset? And if they said, I just want you to help me buy this, and they don't want that judgment, maybe we should just do that. I don't know. Maybe that's the right thing to do because then we are just losing money. Or maybe we just go hardball and go, we will not do this because in 3 years, you're not going to be able to refinance. In 5 years, this is going to be a mistake. So
let's run through both scenarios, right? Let's play it out. Let's run through the scenario. Someone comes to you for a piece of advice, and your advice is contrary to the way you make the most money on that deal, right?
Which is a reality all the time.
Which is very much a reality. So basic example, everyone's understand. Should I buy said property? Yes or no? Yes means you get paid comms or agent fees or whatever that looks like. And then they buy the property and it turns out in 2 to 5 years' time when they refinance, when they get hit up for asbestos or whatever, something came up in pest and building, how does that leave your brand? How does that leave your business? Has that been a positive or negative to your business?
Of course, it's a negative. I think the biggest mistake that people make in property, the single biggest mistake that people make in property is this. It's that they think that if you just buy any property, it goes up. And we all know, because we have experience in the tenure of understanding different cycles, that's not a reality. Unfortunately, everyone's been a hero in the last 5 to 10 years.
For sure.
Right? Everyone's a hero. So, people are buying in places where they've capitalized on 2 years of growth. We know better than that. We know that it doesn't matter like whether it's always gone up in the last 2 years. It's not a reality. So to answer your question, we're not in business anymore.
100%.
Because, if the equity doesn't stack up, if the yield disappears, if the growth isn't there, if you have remedial issues that you can't fix, who do you come to? The advisor that advised you.
Absolutely.
Right. The issue with this is that property is an unregulated product.
Mm.
So no one stepped in. ASIC hasn't stepped in and said, you're not allowed to advise someone. So I have a little bit about that. But yeah.
I've been reflecting on this exact problem in this last week. Why in Sydney particularly, or even in Australia, do we have this impression that property will, no matter what, always go up? Well, I did the maths on it. I ran the numbers. Year 2000, average Sydney house is around $180,000. Oh, sorry, it was just about under 300. The average wage was something like 40, 50 grand. Like there was a ratio there. I think the ratio in Sydney 2000 was like 4.7 times earnings was the average house price. Okay. What happened is that ratio from 2020 to 2025, we've got a quarter century to reflect. It's gone from 4.7 times to 14.3 times. So what we have had is not just regular capital growth, but we've had the prices of assets climbing at a rate which far exceeds income growth. Now, what we have to understand is you can't have two industrial revolutions in a row, okay? So whilst property prices will continue to increase in most cases in some element, it's unrealistic to expect they will grow across the board no matter which property you have in every single market, every single property at that rate. For us to see that to go from, like for properties to go from 4 times income to 14 times income, basically 3 times the ratio, it's like saying in today's dollars, an average house in 25, for that to happen again in the next 25 years, an average house would be worth in today's dollars, $5.5 million, okay, on today's wages, okay? I don't think that's realistic. What we have to actually understand now is that the property market's going to move forward in a most likely scenario would be at a similar rate to that 14, somewhere between 14 to 20 times average income. So if you're not picking the properties that are actually the right ones, you can get burnt. You can get into a property where you're paying interest. You will get into that scenario where you're paying interest and maintenance costs on a property thinking, I'll get the capital growth, but there's no capital growth.
Arkadiusz, is a good question for you. Everyone who wants to buy a property wants to buy the right property, right? Mm-hmm. How do you know what is the right property and what is the wrong property?
I'm not a buyer's agent. And the reason I hate accountants, okay, and I like you guys, is because the large majority of accountants don't stay in their lane. Right? They try to give financial advice. They try to give unlicensed property advice. So I'm not a buyer's agent. So I can't advise on what a particular property is good or bad. We have other people in the business that do that. What I can advise in is the fundamentals of that asset. So what makes an asset good is, why does property go up? Land value, would you agree? Yes. That land value increases, supply, etc. So the basis of the fundamentals of property is land value, right? So we have to get that right. Then we have to look at the replacement cost of that asset. So i.e., if we're buying an $800,000 property and the land value is $600,000 and this property burnt to the floor, what would it cost to replace it? So if there's a arbitrage there, so if you're under that replacement value because building costs have increased, and they're probably not going to decrease, even though some people said if I was a tradie and I was doing a bathroom for 60 grand, I'm probably not going to drop my price.
For sure.
Okay. So that's step one, is understanding fundamentals, right? Step two is cash flow. So how many properties have you seen that are similar to that? How do they cash flow as an investment? How do they cash flow as an owner-occupier? Can you afford it? So it's just about really dissecting the numbers. And we have a system and a process to help anyone watching this, whether you use us or whether you use your own broker, or you can follow the steps. And it's basically understanding your budget, looking at sold data, creating criteria, and then reverse engineering. And how do you know it's a good property or not? I don't know. Ask me in 10 years.
For sure.
Right? No one knows. But past performance isn't an indicator of future performance, but we just hired 4 interns and they're all wearing flared pants and they have mullets.
Yeah.
Like trends seem to come back. Yeah. So It's just one of those things where I can't tell you what a good property is because it's so particular to a client's goals, needs, and objectives.
Yeah.
I spoke to someone that referred to me yesterday. Their goal is very different to, the 22-year-old that's about to get married and trying to buy a family home.
Yeah,
For sure. The retirement or the business owner. Everyone's different.
I
don't have an answer, sorry.
Excellent. You touched on I'm not a buyer's agent.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you, I've not introduced you, why don't you tell everyone what you do and what services you offer?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Arkadiusz, and my personal brand is RKDS. I'm a strategic partner at Strategic Investor Group. So we are financial advisors. We are licensed advisors. We have lending specialists, and we have property buyers. So the way we see it is when you're buying a property, advice is the most important thing because you can go buy the right property, but if the structure and the strategy of your loan or the deposit or the gearing is wrong, you're going to make a mistake. Time and time again, we have clients that buy the right property. Prior to speaking to us, the structure of their loan's wrong and they have to sell the asset because someone told them to use a redraw instead of an offset account. And they've just completely buckled the deductibility of that asset, right? So we always focus on advice. So as advisors, a lot of people think financial advisors just put you into superannuation or do a managed product. We believe that wealth is created through property, and the only reason that is due to leverage. There's still a place for superannuation, insurance, and debt recycling. You're going to do that anyway. That's like a cheeseburger at McDonald's. It's a given, right? And then from a lending arm, we have lending specialists, and they look at the structure and the strategy that the advisor employs for that client based on their goals, needs, and objectives. And what does a broker do? Find you the best rate for that structure, for that goal, for your deposit, for your circumstances. And then from a buying perspective, we help clients as little or as much as they want. So we have complementary education. So how to negotiate, what text to send to the agent, what to say, what not to say. And then we've got an unfair property advantage program, which is a 90-day we hold your hand. So it's like coaching, etc. And then a full-scale buyer's advocacy where our buyer's agent buys for you. But you ready? The buyer's agent is only licensed to find the property for you, present you the property, rate the property on its features and benefits, and then negotiate and close the deal for you. They're not telling you that you should put it in a trust and that you should do that. So our buyer's agents buy property. That is all they do. They don't provide advice. Advisors advise. And then as you know, after our clients are done, we then send them to you for the accounting perspective. What's the gearing? Should they do a tax variation? How should they structure it? That's your goal. So that's what we do. I hope that answers that question.
That's excellent. John, I'll open up to you. So I think part of what you mentioned there is people need to understand their lane and stick to it
100%.
and do that one thing and do it well. John, thoughts on that?
I think the biggest change in Latitude Accountants was probably about 7 years ago when we narrowed down the scope of what we did. When we started the business in 2012, we knew we were accountants, but the idea back then was like, maybe we'll be a one-stop shop and we'll try be mortgage brokers and we'll try be financial planners, we'll try be bookkeepers, we'll try be insurance brokers, and we tried everything. And we realized that we were splitting ourselves thin and doing nothing really well. So we came back in about 2017, 18 and said, the only thing we're going to do is accounting, even to the point where when it came to bookkeeping, which is very closely aligned with accounting, we said, we're not even going to do bookkeeping. And we teed up with a sister company to, for them to do bookkeeping and for us to do accounting. And we never turned back. That is the exact moment in the history of our business where we've now doing 5 times the revenue that we did in 2018. Because we decided we're going to be the very best at compliance and advice in tax and accounting and nothing else, with a focus on small business owners, investors, high net worth individuals, anyone who needs and can afford accounting advice. It is something that I wish I did in 2012, and I would encourage everyone to just stick in their lane. And it's hard for me as a person because my personality is very much like a generalist. Like I like to be across everything and dip my hands into everything. It's good to just remind yourself to, in a business sense, stick to what your business is good at. And I think I'm 100% agreeing with you on that.
Yeah, the thing about you guys, and obviously we've done, work together, is your professional opinion still matters and your professional guidance still matters. And by you understanding the buying journey, the lending journey, the financial advice journey, you're able to advise your client better. Now we're going to have all these strategic client tax reviews with, mutual clients. I'm going to sit in that session, not because I don't trust you. It's because I'm going to learn, unless you don't want me in there, but I'm going to learn in that session, and I'm going to identify opportunities that you see as accountants and your thoroughbred accountants that I don't see because I'm not licensed to do that. And what will happen is when clients bring up circumstances, it aligns with that knowledge. So I think there's nothing wrong with it. It's when you pretend that you are the expert, knowing that you're not licensed to be doing that work. That's the issue with our industry, especially with property. And I'm just tying this back is we have buyer's agents providing unlicensed tax, financial, and lending advice to clients, and they don't understand that they got their license in 2 days and figured out a trick to be able to help you buy the biggest asset that you're going to buy in your life. And you are putting your hands into some software. I won't mention the software's name that all of them are using. It's $1,600 a year. You are putting your financial future into software that costs $1,600 a year.
Let's talk about this. So you earlier mentioned property is not a financial product and therefore it's not regulated, which obviously you're right on. What are your thoughts around that? Generally, let's just get a general. What are your thoughts on property is an unregulated and apparently a non-financial product, even though in Sydney we know how a lot of people make their money.
Let me ask you the question.
For sure.
So I can think, should property be a regulated product?
John, you have a crack. I think we have different opinions. John, you have a go.
Should property be regulated? I mean, the biggest issue I have with regulation of the property market is it could lead to, whenever you regulate any market, it slows things down. So there is a liquidity element to property, which it's hard enough to move a property as it is. You got to, whether there's cooling off or you're doing 66W auction conditions and then conveyances and building a pest and then get the finance approved and then settlement date and then delayed settlement and then the taxes around the sale. I mean, it is an onerous project to buy or sell a property. If we added it into if we looked at it like financial planning, like how hard it is to get a statement of advice to buy a property, I think we're pushing out like what is now even taking people by the time they find the property and do something a year. We're pushing it out to too hard basket to never be done. So ideally, yes, it is a financial product. Yes, it is something that you should get advice around, but I'm just too scared to see what it would do to add the regulation component.
Yeah, I think whether or not it's a financial product is a separate discussion. Let's assume it is a financial product, right? I have a personal belief. So I read a book 5 years ago by Milton Friedman, Free to Choose, and one of the chapters in that book talks about regulatory bodies and regulation and red tape. And I'm a big believer that the free market will work it out without the regulation. And we have a tendency, especially in Australia, to over-regulate, over-red tape and constrain the market very quickly. And we've seen that in the financial planning industry, which I'm sure you know very well, where financial planning is no longer very accessible for someone who needs financial planning services. And so we've just gone complete the other way. And I think that's one of the biggest dangers. And I think, obviously, once government gets their hands on something, it's only going to get more and more red tape. Then it's very irreversible. So this isn't a statement for just financial advice. This is actually a statement across any industry. I would lean towards less regulation as opposed to more regulation and let the free market do its thing and work out who are the good players and who are the bad players. Because I can tell you one thing. If you go to a buyer's agent and they consistently buy crap properties, they will not exist in 5 years' time. The market will work it out to say that these guys are not credible and no one has gotten results. And so you go on a Google review and it will very quickly tell you not to go to them. So I think the market will work it out, and I think we shouldn't regulate things. Whether or not property is a financial product, I think it's a shame that it is a financial product, because at the end of the day, people need a home to live in, and we've gone and made that a financial product. And I don't know how I feel about that. But in the same token, I also think like we've made businesses financial products because you can invest in the stock market in people's businesses. So like, what does my opinion matter in terms of what is or is not a financial product? Arkadiusz, what do you think?
I think your opinion matters a lot because I think you have knowledge and you are advising clients every single day. So I think your opinion matters. It's a quote, and it's like, no matter who you are or where you are, someone somewhere is looking at you as a leader. And I think that's who we are to someone in their financial journey. I think that's the most important thing. And that's also, to the degree, relayed to someone that's advising someone and they're providing unlicensed advice, right? So I'll just touch on two things. I actually think that it's the financial planning business's problem that they haven't made advice affordable. And I think it's absolute bullshit that a financial planning firm can't create accessible advice,
Right.
You can. As a financial planning firm, if you're a financial advisor, you know that your managed fund product has underperformed the index. You know that for a fact. And you dispel a story every time you review your client's file every 6 to 12 months so you can charge your fee. So you can keep paying your staff to provide a service that you know is inferior to an index model. And for anyone watching, an index is just an S&P 500, ASX 200, Warren Buffett's favorite thing, okay? For the most part, active managers, pair advisor fees underperform that. The value of advice is the knowledge and the advice itself. So if you're a financial advisor, create a YouTube video. Create accessibility, courseify it, create accessible products as we do. Like we have something called Money Friends, Save, Invest, Spend Club. It's $49 for a tax kit and you get access to general advice about tax and you can click a button to speak to Latitude. Accessible. Can you use the toolkit to do your own tax? 100%. Does it refer my advice? No, it refers to tax legislation. So you can create these products, right? So there's that side of it. It's the market needs to adapt. The market will work it out. My biggest issue about people that are unlicensed providing financial advice is it, to your point, it takes 5 to 6 years to realize that you've made a mistake in property. And property mistakes are extremely costly to unwind. Because one, if the buyer's agent bought the wrong property and it takes you 5 years to figure out that it was wrong, one, you're 5 years out of the market at a compounding effect of 5 to 7%, you're losing out on that. You have the fees that you've paid for that advisor, you have the mortgage repayments that you've made, and on top of that, let's just say that you bought an owner-occupier, right? Investment's even worse, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you bought an owner-occupier and that asset hasn't grown. Now you have sale costs, someone might not even buy that property because it's not grown anymore, and you've had the stamp duty that you paid. Now your re-entry into the right asset, it's so far away. And that's the issue. So I don't necessarily think we should regulate property. We should regulate the advice that comes around it. If you're a buyer's agent and you are found to be providing any financial advice, ASIC should deal with that. You are not allowed, as soon as you know someone's goals, needs, and objectives, and you're telling them how to structure it, what is that? Advice?
Advice, yeah.
Agreed? Agreed. That is, you are not licensed to do that. So if you're a buyer's agent and you are smart, you should be pairing with accountants, with financial advisors, with lending specialists to provide a holistic approach. My issue is if someone doesn't do something about it now, you know who the government's going to blame for a property crisis in 5 to 6 years? Have a guess. Buyer's agents. You know, it was that guy's fault. They did it. Now we're regulating it, just like the government did to financial advisors. It's financial advisors' fault that this is happening. It's like, no, it's your fault because you allowed it conflicted remuneration. You didn't have a best interest duty. It was your fault that you didn't put this in place. So that's my stand. So I neither agree or disagree. I just think that people should not be providing unlicensed advice.
For sure. Excellent. I'm loving hearing your thoughts. So we'll go into some rapid fire, then we'll go into agree or disagree, and then we'll go into a couple of more main topics. So, John, I might start with you because your money beliefs have definitely evolved over time. What's one money belief you had in your early 20s that you had to unlearn?
Man, I've had so much change in money beliefs in the last, number of years. I think the biggest one is maybe in my early 20s, I would have been more likely to think that given the opportunity, you give people the right amount of money and they'll do what's in their own best interest. And I've obviously, over years and years of working with people, realised that's not the case. I would look around when I was young and I'd see people struggling, why don't people have houses? Why can't they afford the mortgage? Why can't they why can't they pay their tax? And there's two elements there that I misunderstood. One was how uninformed and uneducated like the general public is with money, and then the other one is like personal basically personalities and personal habits. Like there's some things you just can't unteach someone, right? Sorry about that. So why I think the regulation is good and we need the government to actually step in now is because in a free market, I believe what would happen completely void of all regulation is that all the money would pool up in one location, in one person's pocket. There'd be a Buffett, a Bezos, someone like this that would just accumulate all the wealth. And money seems to have this property where it just attracts money, right? So it just ends up in the one place. And then you have everyone just going through on autopilot. Most people are unconscious. They're just spending money. I've got money in the bank. I'll spend it. So they've got bad financial habits, and some of it's education and some of it's habit. So I think what I've realized is it's so important to have the right regulation, help from government, but then the right advisors as well to come in. And I think I was under indexing that as a young person. And so now as I'm getting on, I'm realizing this is important. And I'm actually seeking more counsel for myself and my clients and people in my family even, right, than I would have 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, even though I know 10 times more now than I did 20 years ago.
Very good. All right, Arkadiusz, I'll go to you. What's one...
I was curious about yours because you read a lot of books.
Yeah. What's one money belief you had in your early 20s that you've had to unlearn? I'll have a think.
I'll go first.
You go first and I'll have a think.
So the idea that I can always make more money. So when I was very fortunate because I was good at sales when I was younger. I did door to door, and then I had sold car parts during high school and all that sort of thing. So I was able, if I wanted to go on the 3-month holiday in Southeast Asia, I could just work really hard for a week. But as my business grew and as I found the love of my life and I want to buy a dream home and have children, and you have staff and overheads and rent, the profit margins where you're not just dependent on your income change. So like me moving the needle on a additional 30 grand, 50 grand month or 100 grand month, it doesn't just happen overnight. So I wish I understood that you have to actually build systems, processes, investments, cash flow buffers, because you can't just always make more money.
For sure.
And I wish, my mentors would tap me on the shoulder and go, the 3-month holiday is going to turn into a $3 million house soon. What are you doing?
Yeah. For sure. Good if you flip it back on me, I'd say I learned a ton. If I'm splitting like personal finance and business, I learned a ton about business in my latter part of my 20s and sort of became much more commercial. And I learned the difference between, honestly, the basic stuff like sales, gross profit margins, net profit margins, advertising to sales ROI. There's so much about a business that you just think, everyone works it out like this. I'll start a business, I sell product for $5. If I can sell X amount of products, I'll make X amount of money, and that's where they stop. I'll just make this much money. Like, that's just how business works. And then to your point,
isn't it?
To your point, you realize there's systems, people, staff, overheads, legal. There's so much you learn on the fly. Bad months, good months, seasonalities, experiments, whatever. You learn that all. So from a business perspective, I learned a lot about, and there's a good book called The E-Myth, which takes you from a technician to an operator. And I think I always advise small business owners. That's my business. On a personal finance level, it's debt. And I actually have a problem with the property industry being over-indexed on debt. And so everyone talks about, especially buyer's agent, take as much debt as possible, leverage, and that's the beauty of property and blah, blah, blah. I get that, okay? But Dave Ramsey talks about this, and he talks about there's a biblical principle that says the debtor is slave to the lender, or the person who takes the money is a slave to the person who gives them the money, basically. And I think what a lot of people learned over the last 2-3 years is that, hang on, I don't control my interest rate. The banks control my interest rate. And if I've over-leveraged my asset position and the banks, because over the last 15 years, we never saw interest rates go up, and all of a sudden we realized the banks can turn the screws and my 2% mortgage goes to 6% mortgage and my wage hasn't moved, so now I'm in financial trouble. And I just feel like the property circle over-index debt and talk about debt to an everyday person with no emotional bearing on how that debt makes that person feel. So in my early 20s, I wanted to buy a property every 2 or 3 years and blah, 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 and build up debt and build up a portfolio, blah, blah, blah. But you don't what about when you have to go to sleep at night knowing that there's how do you feel on that roller coaster? How emotional are you going to get when the metaphorical poo hits the fan and you're in debt and you've got to last another 2 years before the cycle turns and blah, blah, blah. There's no, how's your family? What's your personal life going to look like? What are your kids going to look like or feel like? What's your business going to reflect of you? That's what I learned in my latter 20s, where I think my mindset has shifted a lot around how debt can make someone feel. And each person has just a different appetite on debt.
I think we're going to get a reverse view from Arkadiusz on the debt, because
I would love to hear it.
Because you see the value, the utility in debt and leverage.
I always try to think about, if you're listening to this, what exercise you can do to make these assumptions. I think controlled debt is a good thing. And look, the Dave Ramsey's and even us as business owners, we potentially have the ability to create revenue on our terms to some extent. We can hire more staff, we can reduce our costs, we can pay for marketing and increase our cash flow. But if you're watching this and you're a PAYG employee, your ability to earn an income is what will restrict your wealth. So how you position your income to generate wealth will be key. So I'm not opposed to leverage. However, how does that affect your sleep at night factor? So if you're watching this, you both made a really good point, and I made a little bit of a point about it, is I wish I had someone tapping me on my shoulder to ask, in 3 months' time, what am I going to do? In 1 year's time, am I going to try do that self-employed thing? In 3 years' time, I know I don't have a partner at the moment, but I'm in my 30s and I could find the love of my life that has a biological clock. So if I did do that and I had children, how much money would I want in my bank account? And would I still be able to attribute enough savings based on the debt that I have to do that? And I think it's just about working through those steps. I love debt that I can afford, that still allows me to keep building to where I want to be. And the issue is that, once again, if someone as a business is advising you that has a $10 million portfolio or $30 million portfolio or whatever it is they have that due to their business. So you taking on the same risk as them is not necessarily the smartest thing you can do. So I think just take a moment before someone's advising you to gear to the eyeball and think about, what does that look like in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years for you? And then if you're unsure, get advice. Speak to your accountant, speak to an advisor, speak to your broker, and just talk to someone that has been on that journey. And we talked about kids last night. Yeah. And I talked to, like, I'm scared. It's like, I'm about to bring 2 people into this world. I can't take the risk that I'm taking anymore, you know, and you've got 3, you know, so it's like, what do I do? So I'm speaking to people that have been on that journey. How confident were you with your cash flow position? How confident were you taking out that huge mortgage? Did it affect your cash flow? How much were you working? I'm trying to build that pathway. So I don't mind debt that you can control. So I hope that answers that. Absolutely. With some exercises.
No, that's great. That's great. John, one property myth that needs to die. Rapid fire. One property myth that needs to die.
Look, we touched on it earlier in the podcast. I think the idea that we're going to have ridiculous capital growth on every single property in Australia that we've had in the last 25 years, we're going to be in for a rude shock. Rude shock when you see that over the next 25 years, you pick the wrong property as an investment and you're going to be negative capital and cash flow in 25 years from now on that property. And it's just unfathomable because we've had 25 years of unprecedented growth. For sure. You don't get 25 years of unprecedented irrational growth followed by 25 years of unprecedented irrational growth. It's not logic. It's logically impossible. So you really have to get smart. And that's, in a nutshell, don't overbank on that.
Arkadiusz, any thoughts?
If your broker or buyer's agent is screenshotting a valuation showing you the value of your property and it's not a physical val, that's the biggest myth that exists. Is banks are currently fighting for business for people that can afford to take on debt, and a desktop valuation is the biggest myth because it's not the true reflection of your property. So people need to understand that. I'll give you a very good example. We just bought a year and a half ago, we bought an asset for a client at $1.3 million. We just ran a desktop which allowed a cash out of equity of $400,000. I can tell you now that if we sold that property, they would not get that price, that valuation came back. So when I spoke to the client, I said, I just want you to understand that what you're leveraging here is not real. I just want you to understand that. So the risk of you taking out this money to now buy a $1.9 million asset on top of your portfolio means that in 5 years' time, the bank may not agree with that valuation. What would you do? Right? So the biggest myth that needs to be just killed is that desktop valuations are a true reflection of your property value because people are leveraging portfolios and buying multiple assets on the assumption that they are.
That's a scary thought. Yeah.
I'm not loud enough about this. It's people are building portfolios on fake valuations.
Yeah. Just crazy.
That's what the precedent to the property bubble in the States pre-GFC was around GFC was all desktop vals, fake vals, and these things are overinflated by up to 100%.
That's literally happening right now. I don't know if it's going to cause a burst, but
100%. Very good. All right. Great.
You lost your one.
Hey.
You don't have one.
The biggest property myth that needs to die, I probably err towards John. I think that's a fantastic point you raise, and you're right. It's very similar to GFC. The Nina, no income, no assets, no problem. Here's a home, and we'll figure it out from there. But yeah, for me, it's just property will always grow. We seem to live in this world that we think property is always going to grow. Interest rates are always going to go down. I don't think both of those things are true. Things can go up. We just haven't seen it in our lifetime enough to be cautious.
And the only index that matters is not whether the property value goes up in dollars. It will go up in dollars, but that's because we have fiat currency and you know there's such a thing as inflation. It's the real ratio is property versus income.
For sure.
And is property versus income going to grow the way it's grown? I can guarantee you, it's not financial advice, but it's no. Yeah. The answer is no. So your dollar value can go up. You can buy it for $1 million. And in 30 years from now, it'll be 1.1 million. But as a ratio of wages, it could mean it went backwards.
100%. Very good. All right, we're going to go with agree or disagree. So get your paddles at the ready.
All right.
And Arkadiusz, I'll start with you. Buying property is harder now than ever before. Agree or disagree? Buying property is harder now than ever before.
Disagree.
I'm going to go with agree.
All right.
You two disagrees. Arkadiusz, you go first because you're the expert in the room.
We have a I want to buy my dream home issue and I want to live in a suburb issue. So the question is property. You can now enter the market with no deposit, with an equity pledge. And if you are young, your parents have had some of the biggest growth years that we've ever seen in property. So your parents have equity. So you can enter the market with $0. Will it be your dream home? All right, gentlemen, you don't buy a Submariner as your first watch. Ladies, you don't buy a Birkin as your first bag. You're going to buy an entry point. It is easy. You can buy a property with $0. You can then not live in it if you don't want to, and you can outsource that to a tenant. If there's a discrepancy between what you earn and what it costs you, you can then outsource the ATO compensates you, and then there's a holding cost, and that holding cost is tiny in comparison to what it would cost to live in it. And then you can Rentvest. That's another thing. So if you don't have that, there are 2% deposits. There are 5% deposits. There's lenders that will actually lend you the 20%. There's first home super saver scheme. There are so many incentives. So we have I want to buy a certain property issue. We don't have I can't buy a property issue. So it is easy.
Absolutely. Yeah. John, thoughts on that?
I said no, and it's counterintuitive because property prices are higher than they've ever been.
Yep.
So when I say it's easy, I'm not saying they're cheaper. But we've got more information than we've ever had. You've got more access to advice. You've got more access to choices, information, products, and markets than you've ever had. And I think given that, like I remember being a kid and my parents, like the only way they'd look for a new house is like you'd walk past a real estate agent and they'd have like 12 properties at the front and you'd see them and then you know what they are, and then you try to speak to them and see if you can go see it. They'd look at 2 properties, and then on that day, they'd decide of the 2 that they saw, which one they liked more, pros and cons, and they buy one of the 2. And then it was really exciting because when you go on a family holiday somewhere and you'd end up in like some regional place, Jervis Bay, then you can go to the real estate agent and go see what 12 properties they've got for sale.
That's so funny because we've all done that.
And decide if you want to buy an investment property there. Like that's what it was like growing up in the 90s.
100%.
Now it's like, bro, Suburbs Finder, RP Data, realestate.com, Domain, like everyone.
Scrapers, H-Table.
Everything, right? Hey, there's a glut of information. Yeah. So when it comes to ease, I'm saying like it's easier because we've got so much information. But then you've got the analysis paralysis, buying the wrong one, getting the wrong advice, over leveraging, paying too much. So from that side, definitely a lot harder.
Yeah.
So it just depends what element you're looking at. But yeah, I still think it's easier. And now we're seeing a whole lot of people buying properties in self-managed super funds. So it used to be your money, and now you got you and your wife, and then now you got you and your wife, or your partner, your husband, or whatever, and their super, and your super, and their super, and you put it together, and then you get a business, and you buy a factory in your super fund, and your business is paying the rent on the factory, and there's so many ways to do property now that we didn't have back then as well.
100%. I think I took the question far more binary than what you guys did, in that buying any property, there are probably more resources, tools, grants, all the ones Arkadiusz cleverly mentioned there. But in terms of, I always go back to this example. I used to think that, no, it's actually easier now because of X, Y, Z factors. And to some degree it is, but I'll go back to this example. Tufik once told me, we were having this discussion and this is where it came up. Tufik said, when I was 25 and I was an accountant, a house in Maryland, he always goes back to the house in Maryland, a house in Maryland cost X and my salary was Y. That exact same 25-year-old in my business that I would employ has a salary of X and the house in Maryland is Y.
Yeah.
And that salary has not moved much and said property in Maryland has dramatically increased. And you can put in whatever guarantee, whatever, mum and dad guarantee or super saver scheme or whatever you want, but it's not going to change the fact that that person who is 25 years old now is far more leveraged and is going to take a much longer time to repay that asset, and he's going to do it on the same salary. And the whole interest argument has somewhat changed because when Tufik was 25, 13 years ago, the interest rate is probably similar to what it is now because we've had it go up dramatically. And so let's just compare that scenario. If I just isolate that scenario, same wage, low house price, same wage, higher house price. Has it become more difficult? Yes, it has.
Yeah, for one specific, this is exactly what you said, Arkadiusz. For one specific property, then that property is harder to buy.
Yeah.
There's just more options, bro.
Yeah.
Jump on TikTok.
Yeah.
You can buy a property in Dubai.
I'm going to be like just straight devil's advocate. It's like you have to choose your hard. And I'm speaking to someone watching this. It's like choose your hard.
Yeah.
It's like you can't afford to Maryland. Okay, what's your reality?
Yeah.
You either have to earn more money because let's just say you're a first home buyer or Maryland's not for you, right? Bad luck. You can't afford here.
100%.
So I just spoke. It's hard because I just don't have sympathy for people that complain that they're not earning enough because we live in a digital age where you can earn more money. I had a phone call this morning with a 21-year-old that just tried to sell me $22,000 coaching, right? For 10 sessions and I was considering it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is an opportunity to earn more money, right? It's just like, of course, if you're a nurse and, if you're starting your accounting degree, if you want to do this, get your foot in the door. Don't buy the one in Maryland. And then when you do become, a partner in your firm, then you can make that move. So I think it's just perspective and it's choosing your hard. Oh, but it's really expensive and I won't be able to travel. Choose your hard.
Yeah, 100%. There is some has to be a point where reality has to align with what your goals are and who you're trying to be and where you're trying to go in life. So, I think
and unfortunately in Sydney, this is Sydney.
But in another sense, like someone saying, "Oh, I could have bought a house in Maryland for $276,000. Now it's $1.7 million." Bro, I could have bought shares in Nvidia for $4.
Yeah.
I
shouldn't have sold Bitcoin.
I shouldn't have sold my Bitcoin.
So you got to respect that markets go up and down, and it's not fair to say when I was a kid, Microsoft shares were $4 and now they're $300. Who cares? There's properties out there that are still sub $1 million.
I'm going to insert the most random comment here, but there's a guy on YouTube who's an Italian chef, and when something doesn't make sense, he responds with, "If my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike." Have you seen that video clip? Dude, it doesn't matter. Some of your arguments are just irrational, and sometimes you've just got to face it.
But there is a rationale behind the irrationality. It's that the median house price has gone up in Australia and things are more expensive. Let's just learn to deal with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Very good. All right. Financial advice should be free until it gets results. Arkadiusz.
Agree.
With agree. Should be free.
I'll say disagree.
I'm going to go disagree as well. Arkadiusz, your perspective.
If someone is not providing you value immediately in their conversation, you should not be paying for it. Simple. So we charge for our time. Time is money. More time is money.
Yep.
We have an initial 5 to 15 minute consultation where we share our value. And then from there, we work on billable time.
Absolutely.
So, and we immediately provide value, whether it's reshifting someone's perspective or it's helping them. And if I can't help, and there are many positions where a client needs to do their own work, I have complementary free resources for that client to solve their problem themselves. This is what I was referring back to. If you can't solve someone's simple problem to make them come back for the harder one, your business will collapse. Simple. Like it's that simple. If you mentioned, when you're in a position to work with an accountant, your business provides so much free resources to put someone in a position for when they know that it's valuable to get tax advice from you. That's why I agree.
Absolutely. John?
Look, I just think there's an old adage, the there's nothing more expensive than like free advice sort of thing. So I don't disagree that advisors should provide value, but you got to be careful who you're getting your advice from, where it's coming from. And when I say, the question is
financial advice should be free until it gets results.
Yeah, so just be careful where you're getting free advice from.
100%.
But if you're getting it from a qualified advisor who knows what they're talking about, then you should be happy to pay their fees.
Yeah.
Because the value is, the ROI on that good advice is going to 10x whatever you're paying. And, man, basically, like, financial people in that space need to make money to live too. And
So why'd you both disagree? I'm curious what's the disagreement.
So I went with
Maybe I framed the question different
right. So
in my
financial advice should be free until it gets results. I said disagree. I don't think advice should be free, fundamentally, because like John said, if it's free, either you're the product or it's not worth the salt.
The results take time as well.
Yeah.
So like, you don't know sometimes you're getting good advice. So maybe the advice gets results immediately, but, the eye of the beholder cannot see the fruit of those results maybe 12, 24, 36 months later. So what you want to do is like say, who am I paying for advice? And then hope that you've done the research so that you're getting advice from someone who knows their shit essentially, so that you're not getting screwed later.
I think the result comes from the product, or like the result, an advisor, I don't know if the share's going up or down.
Yeah.
I don't know if the property, my advice is valuable due to the position that I put you in.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's hard. I framed that question differently to the way you did
right.
it.
It's
You
like
shouldn't be going to a seminar and buying a property from
correct.
someone that's not charging you.
That's right. And it's like the sugar hit of you can go regional and buy said property and that's going to grow over the next year, but what's it going to do over the next 10 to 20? And, you touched on that earlier. So, no, very good. All right. So most people, we'll go with another one. You shouldn't buy property. No. The property market in Sydney is rigged for the rich. Arkadiusz.
Interesting. This is a bit like the blue chip property thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you need to get in. I agree.
The property market in Sydney is rigged for the rich.
Yeah, I'll agree as well.
Is it rigged for the rich? I think under current circumstances, yes. Arkadiusz?
I think it's amazing, and that's, people are looking. We're unshamedly Sydney-centric, so I'm biased. I love Sydney. Sydney's unique because you go too far north, national park, too far east, water, too far south, right? So a lot of people are going to Brisbane and buying 50 Ks out of Brisbane because they want to be next to a hospital. It's like, bro, go to Campbelltown.
Yeah.
Go to Campbelltown. If you want land, like you now can buy $800,000 land blocks in Campbell, like $800,000 homes where the land value is 700. I don't know, feasibility, that seems okay. And it's rigged for the rich because reality is the government wants Sydney to be a thing. Australia wants Sydney to be a thing. You ready? Sydney people want Sydney to be a thing.
Yeah.
So you can bank on that, and it is paved to the rich, and we do get metro, and we do get additional funding, and we get Vivid, and we get the Opera House, and we're getting another airport. It is rigged for people to want to be in Sydney. So I think there's still room. You don't have to look elsewhere. And I think that's the opportunity cost, is you want to buy where the rich buy.
John?
You know, when you just said that, right? And it's something like one of my thoughts that I think about is like, for this thing to work, like for Sydney to keep going, it's like there has to be a conscious decision that Sydney is for the rich. And what I mean by that is, if everyone collectively agrees that Sydney is a premium city, a premium location where it's not everyone can live there, choose your heart. Like, you want to choose the heart of living in Sydney. It's like, well, maybe there's going to be some places in the world where you're just going to have to be rich. Yeah. And maybe Sydney's turning into one of those places.
York's that reality. Rome's that reality.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like, I often think, what are the incentives for it to not be a wealthy city? And I just don't think there are enough for the people that control decisions, like to disincentivize them from keeping the Sydney market moving and becoming more expensive. So I think what you incentivize is what you get, and I think we're incentivizing negative gearing. I just think the way both the tax system and the way it's set up is incentivizing the rich people to that market and to keep it moving for the rich. So they're my thoughts on that. We'll go to Arkadiusz. I really want your opinion on this, okay? What I've gathered over my property research has been that there seems to be two school of thoughts, and there seems to be one school of thought where you should have blue chip property in great locations and get capital growth and negative gearing that goes with said capital growth, because your yields, you're going to get more capital, less yield, right? Or there's the other strategy, which is more a rent vest, buy regional, cash flow, more properties, more doors, that sort of model. Am I A, right or wrong? And B, what are your thoughts on each strategy?
Okay. Depends on the goals. I personally would prefer to have $1 million asset in a blue chip location. Actually, let's compare Campbelltown and a regional suburb. Okay. So personally, I would much rather have the Uber driver that I had in the morning and his wife's a nurse that live in Campbelltown as my tenants versus Troy from said suburb that can't even afford to buy the home. And I'm going to show you the numbers behind this. If that property was so good in that regional location, right? And say that asset's only 450 grand. So my opportunity is I can buy one $900,000 asset that's blue chip. Okay. It's in an okay suburb that's going to come up. And yeah, my yield won't be that good, but I can create artificial yield. I can build a granny flat, right? I can create that position. If the entry point for that person is only $22,500, if it's so good, why the hell aren't they buying it? And how the hell are they going to afford your rent? So if you are confident that that asset will outperform the $900,000 one, then go for it. There's no right and wrong, because there's plenty of people that have bought off the plan assets and have made money. There are plenty of people that have made commercial investments that are yield plays, but the way to make money in commercial is to continue increasing your yield. That's how capital appreciation works, that have made money. There are plenty of people that have bought regional assets that have made money. And there are plenty of people that buy blue chip assets that make money. It's just subject to your goals, needs, and objectives. So there's no wrong. I would say there's many more markets than that, because you could enter Airbnb arbitrages, you could enter commercial assets. So there's no right and wrong. Our clients prefer to buy capital appreciating assets, and if they need yield, they would create it artificially through subdivision, granny flats, or an arbitrage of continually increasing rent because there's a demand. Sorry, we're those capitalist pigs. We buy very appealing properties where no one wants to move out. That's the goal. So that's my thought. There's no right and wrong.
Can you give me an example of said property? So give me an example of a blue chip asset, because when someone says blue chip, I think they're confused as to what that term means. So, for example, you just said Campbelltown in the same breath as blue chip. I have seen people say, I will only buy 5-10 Ks within city. I will only buy eastern suburbs. And that's what some people think is blue chip. Is it just a framing thing? Where
if I take someone from the eastern, like I have two young clients, two young ladies that are actually actively looking to buy, and their budget's 700,000, and they will not leave the east. So we have like a bus tour thing where we put people in our bus and we drag them out of places that they can't afford, and they can buy in the east. So they could buy a 1-bedroom, 1 bath, no car spot in Randwick in the east, Art Deco, not bad. Actually has appreciated over time, but the growth potential of that asset based on its land value, a suburb does 80% of the lifting. However, when we drag them out to your Helston Park and Dulwich Hill, in our eyes, that's considered blue chip. Why? Because with the metro coming in at the end of the year, that becomes a 15 to a 20-minute conversation into the Sydney CBD. It's got village feel. It still has the greenery. It's not the east, but it's its own economy. So blue chip is always defined by, i.e., what is your budget? What are your parameters? And if someone has a definition of blue chip, they're trying to sell you. Right? So same thing. If you have a budget of 700, this is what you can buy in the east, and this is blue chip for the east. You want waterfront, you want close proximity to the beach. If you're in the inner west, you want close proximity to the metro and the city, and you want lifestyle and livability cafes and a dog park. If you're in the west, you want proximity to a highway, right? And a backyard and a picket fence, and you don't want shitty neighbors and cul-de-sac, kids playing in the street. That's the definition of a Western Sydney blue chip dream. So it's the same thing. I'm sure there's blue chip in Condobolin. I'm sure there's blue chip in Bunbury. Whatever those suburbs offer is blue chip, and it's just choosing your battle.
That is, I've never heard anyone say it like that.
I just made that up.
Extremely insightful. That is actually so insightful. John, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I always thought blue chip meant within somewhere in the eastern suburbs or North Shore, and maybe waterfront. But I like that the blue chip, like in every I hear Martin North, as one of our friends, say on his YouTube. He says there's markets in markets, right? So you have to, in the same suburb, you've got like a lot of social housing on one side, and on the other side, 90% owner occupiers, and you really need to. I think that's why the advice is important, to work out. Let's look at the contract. Let's look at the zoning. Let's see what's going on in there, and make sure you're actually buying something that is, going to suit your needs and your goals. Another thing that I find interesting is that you're actually helping shape people's goals. So my perspective on that has been a little bit more like not putting a value judgment. Like my approach to people, if someone comes to me with a business idea, I'll tell them if I think the idea is good or no good, or why I think that, what I've seen.
Your accountants, that's literally your job, yeah.
That's what we do, right? Yeah. But to the idea that I'd put a client in a bus and drive them to another location and give the advice and say, we'll see that, like that is actually very unique. So when you said that, I'm like, I don't know anyone else who does that. And that's actually the other one thought I was thinking, how mad, like this guy's doing things no one else would do. I was thinking, bro, there's no way you can make money doing that. So how do you navigate through like giving so much value and making money?
It's my problem, not the clients.
Yeah.
On the roadmap of how I see it,
yeah,
I actually think we can make money. So our unfair property advantage program is $4,400 for an individual, or $5,500 as a pair. And this is built for someone that doesn't want to necessarily pay a buyer's advocate. And in certain markets, you don't need to pay a buyer's advocate because the agents put every listing online, right? So it's just about how you position it and how fast and the speed that you move at. So the unfair property advantage program, and if anyone's listening to this, even if you don't want to use us. But if you don't, you should follow these steps. 1, work with a lending specialist to understand your budget and every loan option available to you, right? Step 1. Step 2, get your budget, go to the sold section of realestate.com and domain and look at every asset that you think is good and put it in there. Then ask everyone around you what they think is good up to your budget and put those in. Compare those. What are the land values? How do they cash flow? How have they grown over the last 10 years? And then even prior to pre-approval, start going to opens. Learn how to speak to agents, go out there, do your thing. Then when you're ready, what we would do is we'd actually take you out to the best versions of those assets based on a client's brief, right? So, okay, your goal is capital appreciation and you will need the yield to be at least 4.6% for it to align with your goals. So go to the for sale section based on the knowledge, look at what things sell for, understand what they rent for, the depreciation, and go look at those assets. And then from there, every Friday, we make sure that they're okay. We have 2 sessions with a buyer's agent that they can tap into at 30 minutes to guide them on the sheet, to guide them on the search. And they have 2 cash flow sessions with a financial advisor to understand how to cash flow. It's a self-directed system. So why do I think it's profitable is because no one wants to touch the first home buyer market. It's shit. Because what you do is there's no money because no one's nailed it, right? But realistically, first home buyers are a large component of the market. So the biggest issue mortgage brokers have is they'll pre-approve a first home buyer and the buyer won't buy. The large majority of our first home buyers buy within 90 days because of the work that they do beforehand. Our issue is catching someone at the right stage, because I think there's stages in property. There's uninformed optimism. Oh my God, how hard can it be? Informed pessimism. Oh my God, why are the agents lying to me? Why can't I afford anything? Then there's crash and burn. Crash and burn is, oh my God, it's too expensive. I might consider a different state. So 1, they pay too much for a property. 2, they buy the wrong asset. Or 3, they just give up. Informed optimism is knowing exactly where your budget is, exactly where you should be, exactly who sells your stock, and what asset you are buying based on your non-negotiables and your asset position. And remember how I said at the start, in 3 months, I'm going to be here. In 2 years, I'm going to be here. In 5 years, I'm going to be, and what the property needs to do that. Of course, we can't control it, but past performance is some indicator of future performance. Shade the growth, shade the yield. And then that means that agents will like dealing with you too. I had a young lady, she was 22 years old. She received a large inheritance and she was calling agents. It's like, what's the frontage? Where's the easement, etc. And I had agents calling me, who the fuck is this girl, man? It's like, they were just impressed because the agent wants it to be easy for them too.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's the answer. Ask me in 2 years how it goes. I don't know.
I hope it goes well, because if you can solve that problem, you're
Yeah.
going to create a valuable service in the market, fill a gap,
we're going to help a lot of people.
and help a lot of people. And that's it, right? It's about adding value in the world and making a difference and helping people achieve their goals. You don't take anything with you.
100%.
So you want to make a difference. You don't want your legacy to be just how much profit you made. I was speaking on the last podcast saying that profits are sometimes bad. What I mean by that is sometimes you're making too much profit because you're extorting or standing over people in a sense. You're charging ridiculous amounts of money to give no value.
I can do a free webinar right now with our following, and I could get 100 people. And if I sell 10 off the plan assets there, I could make $200,000 to $500,000 that webinar, but I can't sleep at night.
That's right.
Like if you referred your sister and I did that, and in 5 years, like I can't even talk to you.
Yeah.
It's like
100%.
it's the wrong thing to do. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right, awesome. We're going to go on one more question. I'll keep it short, but let's talk about a little bit about rent vesting as a strategy. Or do you buy your first home, or do you rent vest for a little and then buy the dream home later? We've touched on it somewhat, but generally speaking, what do you see?
We have something called the DTI lie, which is the debt to income ratio lie. People think that you have unlimited borrowing capacity, and it's because they're being fed content from buyer's agents and lending specialists,
Set up a
mortgage
trust,
brokers,
get a letter from your accountant, set up 400 trusts.
where
and
there's
have 400
two banks
properties.
that do that.
Yeah.
You're running legislation risk there.
And it's difficult to get a property that services themselves and get an accountant to sign off on that. But anyway.
And exactly.
Yeah.
But forget about that, right? Everyone I speak to wants to build a property portfolio, but they're limited by their income. So to answer your question, why not por qué no los dos? So consider both, right? So why not go, if I was to live in this asset and I could live in it for a period of time to make it my principal place of residence, forget about all the stamp duty exemption, but to make it my principal place of residence, speak to your accountant about the length of time that you need to do that. And it'd be hard for me to live in that asset for that period of time because the repayments would suck, right? But once again, choose your hard. What would then happen if I was to move out and I had that asset appreciating for me at the growth rate of where I want to be, right? So my example is I'd love to buy a ridiculous asset in Surrey Hills where I can dig 2 levels down, build 2 levels up. The entry point at that right now is 6.5 million. I know which suburbs I can enter at 2 to 3 mil that have that comparable. So it's the same for you. If your goal is to buy a property in Bondi, waterfront, what is the capital appreciation of that? So why not consider, you can't afford that property in Bondi right now. So why not consider buying an asset, right, that has historically had that same capital appreciation, move in, move out, rent vest, rent where you want to live, and then sell it. Everyone's like, I don't want to sell. Why not? Why not flip your way into the higher asset? But the issue that people have is I want to buy in Bondi. So instead of buying something in the eastern suburb that has comparable growth or something in the West, I'm going to go buy 2 properties in fuck knows where and keep renting and hope that they do the same. And I'll pay CGT on those assets. The reality for anyone watching this is if you make a property move, it might be your last one. So also if you buy something, why not, if shit hits the fan, you can live in it because rents are going to continue going up. And fun fact, I just said it once because I thought it was cool. Right, but if you're not earning at least $250,000 as an individual or as a pair in 5 years, you can't afford to rent in Sydney.
That's the truth.
Fact.
Yeah.
So what are you doing?
Yeah.
Where are you going to live? So what's your reality? If you can't afford in Sydney now, Sydney where you want to be, buy a house in Campbelltown because that might be your drive.
100%.
And rent it out. And if shit goes well for you, then great, sell it and buy something in Bondi. But if it doesn't, at least you're in Campbelltown, the 40-minute drive is going to suck. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on rent vesting is, if you keep renting, you better hope that those assets you bought in Condobolin or Bunbury are going to be comfortable for you to live in because you ain't going to be able to afford to rent in Sydney soon.
Couldn't agree more. John, any final thoughts, questions, comments about anything property, finance, money related?
No, well, I would say this. I've done a lot of work with Arkadiusz. It's been a breath of fresh air. What's reassuring for me...
Thank you.
No worries. She referred him a client recently, and this is what I find validating. I had concerns and issues about a property a client was looking to buy, and then without even communicating the facts, to them and just letting them run the course, we're getting back the same feedback. So when you're getting multiple sources of people around you that are echoing the same sort of feedback and opinion, you're probably getting the right advice.
Yeah.
All right. So there's like, there's value in like wisdom having like a few people around you, a team around you that are actually have your best interest at heart and not their best interest. So, I think I've got a lot to think about. It was good. I enjoyed, delving a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, gentlemen.
it was good.
Thank you so much. Well, Arkadiusz, thank you. We could have talked honestly for hours.
Thank you for letting me talk so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. We do have one final question from our last podcast, and I'll ask you to think about what question you'd like to ask our next guest. But the question for you is, I'll open it up to both of you. Arkadiusz, I'm going to direct it to you first. At what point in your business journey should you start to think about paying dividends out as opposed to reinvesting it back into the business?
Dividends as a salary or?
I want to say, because real dividends should be in addition to your salary.
Yeah.
So I want to say in addition to your salary.
When your personal goals are more important to you than your business goals.
That is one of the best answers from a non-accountant you will ever hear, ever in your life. Because the whole idea of every dollar you take out of your business is going to fund your personal life versus every dollar you leave in your business is going to fund your business. And you need to come to a point where one of those is going to be where the focus is going to get more of your attention. So that's a fantastic answer. John, what are your thoughts around
I'll
that?
piggyback on that. Great answer, obviously. But I'd say if your personal goals are greater than your business goals, what are you doing in that business? Do you know what I mean?
You should get for an exit more than
No, but what are you doing? Like if you're not in a vocation, a business, if you're not spending the best part of the 40, 50, 60 hours a week with your best energy doing what is aligned with your personal goals, then what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
So you want real alignment? Make sure you're doing something every day that you believe in and is right up there, aligned with your personal goals. And I see that in Arkadiusz. I see that with even us here. It's like we want to help small business owners, people with the financial knowledge, of tax, accounting, growing their businesses. So for me to pull money out of this business to buy in Kadablin or one of those random names you said, versus helping more business owners, and like for me, it's a no-brainer. I've got 100% investment in helping small business owners and helping our clients. So if we could do more and do better and do that for more people with more headcount here every day, that's the happiest thing in the world for me.
Yeah, 100%. Excellent. Question for the next podcast.
It's a question I ask myself every single morning, and it's for writing one. And on the back of asking that question, I allocate 2 to 3 hours in my calendar to solve it. It's what one thing is causing you the most anxiety and stress that you are avoiding, and what can you focus on right this second to move forward onto that, like to make that not
That's an excellent
anxiety
question.
inducing.
It's an excellent question. Very good. I look forward to hearing the response on the next podcast, and something I'll be thinking about until then, to be honest. Arkadiusz, like I said,
Gentlemen,
thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. We've gotten so much insights, and I'm sure the audience can take something out of this as well. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Arkadiusz.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, excellent. Done.
Thanks.
Thanks.
That's a wrap.